And there is another Chinese threat to U.S. security, and it also involves high technology.
Jim Axelrod shows you how Chinese spies are targeting U.S. service members on social media to get American military secrets.
It was here on this sprawling seaside Navy base in Southern California where Thomas Zhao, then a 26-year-old naval electrician, admitted to passing sensitive documents to an undercover Chinese intelligence officer. We obtained this recording of his confession.
So why were you taking money from him?
It's free money. He's just taking a couple pictures.
He absolutely betrayed his country.
Sitting across from Zhao on that day in August 2023, NCIS Special Agent Ryan Norris.
I think he, over the past 2 years, had a relationship that he knew was nefarious, and I think he was realizing he was finally caught.
The gig was up.
Exactly.
That nefarious relationship began in a networking group on the Chinese-owned social media app WeChat. The Chinese intelligence officer posed as an investor.
The intelligence officer presented himself as a researcher that was looking at the global markets.
By then, Norris told us, COVID had made it more difficult for spies to travel abroad. So China's intelligence officers started leaning on virtual espionage, gleaning military secrets through online contacts. In the last 2 years, federal law enforcement agents have told us they've identified about a dozen such cases. They've secured convictions against 3 service members recruited by suspected undercover agents of China.
They will turn over every stone to try and collect what they can.
Kevin Vorndran heads the FBI's counterintelligence division. U.S. officials told us China is trolling professional networking sites, including LinkedIn, to find American service members and others who hold U.S. government security clearances.
Members of the military, former members of the military, list their resumes. It exposes their expertise. And through that, it makes targeting by an intelligence service and a sophisticated intelligence service simple to accomplish.
In Zhao's case, what started as chats about stock trades began to veer into sensitive areas. Questions about naval exercises in the Pacific, where China seeks to challenge U.S. military strength.
In the end, he received approximately $15,000.
Court records revealed the agent asked Zhao to take photographs and videos of restricted areas and told him to destroy evidence of their communications.
How does that not raise every red flag available to Thomas Zhao?
It should have. And Zhao stated that he questioned the intelligence officer occasionally.
When I tried to cut the relationship with them, it's like, it's already kind of late.
You feel like you were trapped?
Yeah.
Zhao, a U.S. citizen since he was 12, was arrested, pleaded guilty, and is currently serving more than 2 years for bribery and conspiracy. But his actions did not rise to the level of espionage.
I was like, this is impossible.
His wife told us while her husband made a mistake, he was just as shocked as anyone that he was dealing with a Chinese intelligence officer.
Was Thomas Zhao scammed, or did he willfully and knowingly betray his country?
He will never do that. He will never betray this country. That's not him.
A spokesperson for China's U.S. Embassy denied knowledge of the Zhao case, telling CBS News it, quote, hopes the United States will stop hyping up the so-called Chinese espionage risk, end quote. But the NCIS agent we just heard from, Ryan Norris, told us he expects the Chinese are paying close attention, and he thinks they'll be watching this story tonight to see if they can learn anything about what led investigators to Thomas Zhao.
And former FBI Director Wray said this threat from the Chinese, the technological threat, is the biggest possible threat. So let me ask you, though, about Zhao, Jim. Low-level guy. So what does this say about the Chinese, the net they're casting?
Well, that should give us a sense of just how wide that net is, right? I mean, Thomas Zhao is low-level. Forget the cloak and dagger stuff you think of when you think of espionage, the back alley drops of top secret files. This is thousands of Chinese agents sitting, they don't even have to travel here, sitting at computer terminals in Beijing, sending out thousands of probes they only have to hit once. Now get this, the FBI told us that the volume of espionage activity the Chinese are directing at the United States right now surpasses the volume sent to the United States from all other countries combined.
Jim, it's rare for the FBI to talk about this kind of thing. publicly, right? So why do we think they're going public with it?
Well, in this new kind of espionage, this virtual espionage, one of the only tools available is awareness. In other words, every current service member or retired service member, anyone with access to information the Chinese might want is a target. So the FBI wants to make them all aware this is going on. It was unusual. It struck us that it was unusual. That tells us about the nature of the threat and just how seriously they're taking it.
That it is.
Jim Axelrod. Thank you, Jim.
Tonight, a CBS News investigation into the dark and dangerous side of online dating. This week, we'll take a look at the threat affecting tens of thousands of Americans, largely in secret. CBS's Jim Axelrod meets a daughter whose mother was ensnared in a romance scam that cost her far more than her life savings.
Kelly Dow is a daughter searching for answers.
I have an appointment with Detective Jeff Phillips
About what happened to her mother. Laura Kowal, a 57-year-old retired healthcare executive who was widowed in 2015 and moved from Chicago to the small town of Galena, Illinois, to start her next chapter.
Oh, I love you, honey.
She had all these buckets full in her life, but there was this one bucket that was missing of having a relationship.
So Laura, like 3 in 10 adults have done, turned to online dating, creating a profile on Match.com.
It felt safer to do it that way than to go to a bar and meet somebody.
Online dating felt safer.
She matched with someone who called himself Frank Borg, and who used these 2 pictures stolen from a Chilean doctor. Frank claimed to be a Swedish businessman.
Clearly, my mom felt the emotions of feeling loved. And I know there's a lot of people out there saying, well, how could that happen?
64,000 Americans were taken for more than $1 billion by romance scammers last year, more than double the $500 million it was just 4 years before.
I'm calling in regards to your mother.
When Kelly got a call from a federal investigator
who may have been involved in a fraud scam.
Kelly?
Yeah.
Deputy Tavarthan with the Sheriff's Office. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
she raced to her mom's home, only to find it empty.
You must have been freaking out.
I was.
A search for a missing woman. Laura Kowal was last seen on Friday.
Turning the house upside down, Kelly found emails detailing a fraudulent investment scheme involving a fake company called Goose Investments. CBS News reviewed hundreds of emails from the scammer, laying out an elaborate scheme. Over the course of nearly 2 years, Frank convinced Laura to send him $1.5 million. But Goose Investments wasn't real. Frank wasn't real. And buried in a file cabinet was this note from Kelly's mom. I've been living a double life. Yes, it involves Frank. I tried to stop this, but I knew I would end up dead. Laura's body was found in the Mississippi River, more than 200 miles away, somewhere Kelly says she'd never been. The medical examiner called it death by drowning, never ruling homicide or suicide.
I had a lot of questions for the sheriff's department down in Missouri that was responsible for the recovery of her body.
Dissatisfied with the response from law enforcement, Kelly began investigating herself, tracing the possible routes where her mother's car was seen on surveillance tape.
This service station here
Yep.
captured your mom's vehicle.
Yep.
Getting answers is now Kelly's life's work.
It wasn't until I learned that I was going to be a mom myself and have a daughter that I knew that one day she would know the full story of how her grandmother passed away. And ultimately, her grandmother's story can save someone's life.
Tonight, more of our series on internet romance scams targeting Americans with a look at an elaborate scheme that cost one victim a whopping $700,000. Our year-long investigation took us to 3 continents, including Africa, where scammers working in secret rooms convince victims across the globe to send them their hard-earned money. Here's CBS's Deborah Patta with tonight's Eye on America.
Operating out of underground boiler rooms across Ghana, online criminal syndicates prey on elderly Americans running sophisticated scams that break hearts and empty bank accounts. They pretend to fall in love in order to steal their victims' life savings. And as this fraudster known as Kohler admitted, there are fleeting moments of remorse.
Sometimes we take money from people and feel like, oh my God, how are they going to feel?
But in the end, it's all about survival.
Most young guys, if this game had not come, they have to pull the trigger on people and steal from them.
They may not be putting a gun to people's heads, but the cruelty of this crime is no less devastating, leaving victims emotionally bereft and financially ruined.
Is this fair?
Gerald Pangpari heads up the anti-money laundering unit in Ghana's Organised Crime Office.
We have a lot of unemployed youth, people who are talented, who have gone to school and they don't have anything to do.
What kind of people do they prey on?
Caucasian male, they are elderly people who are quite lonely.
Ghanaian scammers told us they prefer targeting men as they're easier to trap and less likely to report it because of their deep shame. We found one such scam. The victim, a 75-year-old American radiologist we're calling John, not his real name. The syndicate boss, 34-year-old Alfred Kwame Aivo, and the accomplice, a mysterious blonde woman. John declined an interview, but we know he believed he was in love with a woman called Grace Erskine, an Australian living in the US. In fact, he was actually texting with syndicate boss Alfred Aivo, posing as Grace. Aivo controlled the scam, which included the extreme measure of hiring the mysterious blonde woman to play the part of Grace for any in-person meetings John insisted on, as these text messages reveal. Aivo offers to pay her $100,000, but the woman wants more than double that, threatening, "Without me, everyone gets nothing. I could always call and say it was a scam." But she doesn't. And pretending to be Grace, she visited the radiologist in the US, even meeting his family, and claimed she'd inherited a Ghanaian gold mine that John was offered a stake in to secure their future together. These texts show the scammer asking her to meet John in Ghana, insisting it's just 1 week plus TLC. She doesn't seem keen to get physical. Whatever happened, John did travel to Ghana and stayed here at the same hotel as Grace in Accra, while syndicate boss Aivo posed as their driver. And John was so enamored with Grace, he unwittingly paid over $700,000 for a fraudulent investment in a non-existent gold mine. The money was a red flag for Ghanaian detectives, as Aivo was unemployed.
We realized that the person did not have any form of work that is commensurate with the amount of money that were coming into his account.
Aivo was arrested but died of an unknown illness before serving prison time. The mysterious blonde woman posing as Grace had vanished until CBS News tracked her down last week outside Sydney, Australia. Her real name is Rebecca Jade Silk.
Are you sorry? Do you have anything to say to his family?
When confronted, she did not deny or confirm the allegations, keeping her mouth shut and her head down. Silk has not been charged with any crimes. She remains a person of interest for Ghanaian police, but she has a lot to answer for, as Ghana and the US battle a crime that's reached epidemic proportions, with scammers around the world willing to do anything for money. For Eye on America, Deborah Patter, New York.
How much time do you spend doing this? According to a survey, the average smartphone user scrolls the equivalent of 78 miles a year. That's 3 marathons. It may be good exercise for your finger, but there is evidence it may be hurting your brain. Meg Oliver has tonight's Eye on America.
Katie Page Rosenberg, a freshman at the University of North Carolina, Asheville.
2 successes, 2 failures.
Recently realized what too much scrolling was doing to her.
How many hours were you spending on your phone?
Oh, God, probably like 9.
9 hours?
I was just kind of constantly on it.
You may have heard stories like hers before.
I wasn't able to focus. because I would have to take out my phone every couple of minutes.
But now you can actually see the science behind it.
Smartphones have wide-reaching changes all over the brain, and specifically it grows here and it shrinks there.
Psychiatrist Brent Nelson is applying this new science at Newport Healthcare, which has mental health treatment centers for teens across the country.
This is a brain that's addicted to a smartphone.
These are MRI images from a recent study in Korea. All the red indicates increases in brain activity, the effects of smartphone addiction.
Do you want your brain to be this colorful?
You don't.
Why?
Well, because this is showing where the brain is working extra hard compared to a non-addicted brain when asked to do actually a pretty simple task.
Addicted smartphone users' brains were so colorful, so active, it made them less attentive and more easily distracted, what's now informally called brain rot.
What does that look like in real life?
Yeah, let's take school, for example. Sitting in class, and you're trying to focus. They're going to be looking around, not attending to what the teacher is trying to teach them.
Dr. Nelson says emerging research points to even greater risks.
We're just starting to see these changes, and we know they're connected to behavioral changes, depression, anxiety. The dangers are hiding in there.
Social media had really influenced me in a lot of ways. TikTok would kind of push these videos of people popping an edible before school, and I was like, if I do this, maybe I'll be cool, and I started self-medicating.
To deal with that, last year she checked into a treatment facility.
If you hadn't gone to treatment, where would you be today?
I don't think I'd be here. It was really bad.
Katie had to give up her phone in treatment. There, she found other outlets from drawing to playing guitar that helped rewire her Gen Z brain. The key, perhaps, analog antidotes reminiscent of another generation.
Playing in the dirt, drinking from the hose, sort of the Gen X kind of mentality, is shown to actually allow folks to recover, to feel better, to make it easier to kind of go about their day.
In short, it's good to stop scrolling and start strumming. For Eye in America, I'm Meg Oliver in Asheville, North Carolina.
Katie used to spend 9 hours a day on her phone. Now she is down to less than 2. Good for her.
Important news tonight for parents who allow their toddlers to use iPads or another kind of tablet. A new study finds too much tablet time could have unintended and harmful consequences. Here's CBS's Janet Shamlian.
Farrah Butler is a busy Atlanta mom who occasionally lets 3-year-old Oliver play on an iPad.
When I need a break, mainly in the mornings when I'm trying to unload the dishwasher, and in the afternoons when I'm trying to cook dinner.
Do you try to limit screen time with Oliver on the iPad?
Of course, I try, yes, as best as I can.
It's hard.
It is hard, especially when you're a mom and you just need a few minutes of a break.
Some say moms and dads are using tablets as a digital pacifier to soothe children as they cope with parenting challenges. But at what cost? A new study finds preschool-age children logging 75 minutes or more of daily screen time displayed more anger and frustration as they got older and had trouble regulating emotions, which often resulted in parents giving them even more screen time by age 5. The author of the study, Carolyn Fitzpatrick, says she conducted it during the pandemic.
It might allow parents to immediately avoid a temper tantrum. But in the long term, repeated use of this kind of strategy does not allow children to develop strong internal emotion regulation skills.
What's his reaction when you take the iPad away?
He is not happy. He is not a fan of getting the pad taken away at all.
Butler, who has 3 children, says she and her husband briefly took tablets away from their kids and may do it more often.
We saw their behavior improve all around, and they didn't really seem to mind too much. They found other things to do with their time. So all in all, it was a positive experience.
So how much screen time should a young child get? Well, the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends for preschool children 2 and up only up to an hour a day, and it should be educational in nature. Major?
Janet Shamlian, thank you.
The growing popularity of cryptocurrency has sparked an increase in Bitcoin ATMs, making it easier to purchase the digital coin for cash. With nearly 30,000 of the new ATMs in the U.S., CBS News has found they've also increasingly become tools in scamming Americans out of real cash. For tonight's In Depth, CBS's Brian New reports law enforcement is warning users of the ATMs to be on guard for fraud.
These are a poor man's car collection.
80-year-old Joseph Buentello was cruising through retirement when he received a call erroneously claiming his son was in jail.
I was scared. I hit the panic button and not let my panic take control of me, of my good judgment.
The caller told Buentello if he wanted to get his son out, he needed to rush to his local grocery store and send $5,000 through a Bitcoin ATM. Buentello said he never even thought about calling his son first.
There's the printout.
Buentello had been scammed.
So they said, there's nothing we can do about it. That money's already been distributed. They said it was distributed the minute you got through putting your money in there.
And which is probably why those fraudsters wanted you to use that machine.
Yeah, exactly.
According to the FTC, from 2020 to 2023, consumer losses in Bitcoin ATM scams skyrocketed nearly tenfold to $114 million. And getting the money back has been tough.
That's me in 1970.
When Sheriff Parnell McNamara first pinned on a badge, the biggest thieves in McLennan County, Texas, were bank robbers.
Take a gun, go rob a bank, get the money, we'd go after them. But this is a totally different deal now.
After a caller scammed an 83-year-old woman in Waco, Texas a couple years ago into depositing $15,000 into this Bitcoin ATM, Sheriff McNamara's deputies pulled the cash right out of the ATM and returned it to her. The Bitcoin ATM operator then sued the county, claiming the seizure was unlawful. The lawsuit was eventually dismissed and the woman was allowed to keep the money, but only after the county admitted that the funds were seized in air.
Do you regret the way things were handled at all?
I don't regret it at all. We got the lady's money back. It should have gone back to her.
Right here, fraud warning.
Bitcoin ATM operators told us they take extensive measures to protect users from fraud, including displaying up to 6 screens alerting customers to potential scams. A few states have recently passed laws for Bitcoin ATMs, but in most of the country, they're largely unregulated.
I feel like such a fool.
Buentello says had there been any sort of refund policy in place when he made his transaction, he believes he could have saved his money and avoided the scam. Brian New, CBS News, Dallas.
It's being referred to as the biggest crypto heist in history. The FBI says that North Korea is responsible for stealing $1.5 billion in virtual assets from the cryptocurrency exchange Bybit last week. According to CrowdStrike, a cybersecurity firm, groups behind the attack like this one are becoming more efficient and focused. That's just one of the findings in CrowdStrike's 2025 Global Threat Report. Here to discuss it is Adam Myers, Senior Vice President of Counter-Adversary Operations at CrowdStrike. Adam, what are some of the other top-line findings of the report?
Thanks. So some of the things that I think were most alarming, we saw a massive spike in activity coming from the People's Republic of China, 150% year-over-year growth in terms of activity from China across the board in some sectors like media, financial services, manufacturing. That was 200 to 300%. And we saw an increase in adversaries trying to move away from standard kind of attacks that they've been using over the years, an increase in voice-based phishing attacks, for example, 442% in the past year.
And was that increased activity from China smarter activity or just more frenetic?
They're really maturing what they're doing, and so it is smarter. And one of the things that I think is most concerning, that after almost 2 decades of investing in offensive cyber capabilities, they've achieved parity with many of the other big cyber players out there from a nation state perspective. So and this is all tied to their strategic objectives, things like the Belt and Road Initiative, where they're trying to become the leader not just in Asia Pacific but all across the globe.
And Adam, what about, there are a lot of cuts going on in the federal government, some of it in the areas meant to monitor this kind of very kind of activity. How do you square those two things going on at the same time?
Well, we work across the board with lots of different federal agencies and have been providing them support. And I think that there's a lot of opportunity for us to find ways to disrupt these adversaries and to really start to kind of raise the cost of doing business for them.
But is there any way in which the diminished federal capacity to do this leaves the door open to possible threats?
Well, I think we're going to have to wait and see what happens. You know, we've been working very closely with federal agencies here in the U.S. and across the globe, and you know, we haven't seen anything at this point. But you know, we'll continue to work with them and try to figure out how to best disrupt these adversaries.
The Empire State strikes a major blow to social media companies. New York Governor Kathy Hochul signed a landmark bill into law that restricts tech companies from targeting children with addictive feeds. The governor sat down for an exclusive interview with CBS News senior business and tech correspondent Jolene Kent to discuss this revolutionary measure.
With the flick of a pen, New York Governor Kathy Hochul cemented a new law today, restricting social media companies from using addictive algorithms in feeds targeting kids.
We're seeing the effects in suicide rates, teenagers who are in the throes of depression.
She sat down with CBS News for an exclusive interview.
Why did New York choose to target the algorithm?
But the most important part, in order to liberate our children, we have to get right to the source of the trauma that's being inflicted on them.
In this first-of-a-kind state law, no suggested posts will be allowed in kids' feeds. No related notifications from midnight to 6 a.m. without parental consent. And new age verification tools will be set by the state attorney general. If the social media platforms do not comply, they can be fined up to $5,000 per violation. Mom Bernice Tsai is cautiously optimistic.
Now there's a conversation of actually we can try to take a crack at this. We can try to change it. It doesn't go far enough, but I think they're opening the door.
NetChoice, which represents major tech companies like Meta and Google, says the new law violates the First Amendment by censoring content.
At the end of the day, that's a decision that should be left up to parents, not government and not Silicon Valley.
What's your response to that?
You know, our kids are in a special category. We don't let them buy cigarettes. We have guardrails to protect our young people before they become adults and can make their own decisions.
The New York law is set to go into effect 180 days after the state attorney general determines the exact guidelines. We reached out to all the major social media platforms, and Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, said while it does not agree with every aspect of this bill, it does support legislation requiring parental approval to download apps. Nora, Jolene Kent with this important story. Thank you so much.
If you've ever been distracted from a job you really wanted to complete, let me tell you about the novelist Victor Hugo. He had a book to write, but he just couldn't get around to it. He partied a lot. With 6 months to go, little work completed, and a publisher looming over him like a hunchback in a tower, he took drastic action. He gave away all his clothes and locked himself in his room with nothing but a plain brown woolen shawl. He cut off every possible distraction and wrote The Hunchback of Notre Dame. That story came to mind when I read a new Harris poll showing that 81% of Gen Z, those between 13 and 28, wish it were easier to disconnect from their digital devices. I hesitate to claim I know anything about what a younger generation is experiencing, but I feel this one in my bones myself. Our problem is the reverse of Victor Hugo's. His distractions were external: coffee houses, salons, more than the average share of amorous encounters. Our distractions are internalized. We become addicted to a distraction in our pockets. It's no longer a matter of our setting, but of our self. The distractions come to define work, worth, and attention. When 81% of a generation wants less contact with the defining technology of our age, that's not a private struggle like Hugo's. It's a civilizational scream. The tools we built to amplify our minds are now muffling them, melting us into a mediocre lump. Hugo's act reminds us that constraint can be a path to freedom. He didn't just eliminate distraction, he built an environment for deep work. Gen Z is asking for the tools to do the same in a world where distraction is ambient and total. They're trying to resist a system designed to devour their focus. Older generations, especially those who helped build that system and who suffer from it themselves, should find a way to lend a hand.
The Surgeon General of the United States is so concerned about the threat social media poses on young people that he's calling on Congress to mandate health warning labels like those on tobacco products. He said these platforms are contributing to a significant mental health crisis among children. CBS' Zana Werner takes a closer look.
Ask mom of 4, Kieran Dodeja Smith, about dealing with her kids' social media use, and she'll tell you it's been a failure.
Managing and navigating social media is definitely one of the most difficult things, I think, as a parent. There are a lot of positives that come out of it, but it's just this wild, wild west that we don't know what's out there.
Her teens, she said, spend hours online, and that's common. A Gallup poll showed on average, teens spend nearly 5 hours a day on social media. But research shows adolescents who spend more than 3 hours a day face double the risk of anxiety and depression. Surgeon General Dr. Vivek Murthy is calling for the warning label to state that social media is associated with significant mental health harms for adolescents.
We have to act with urgency. The most important thing we've got to do is make social media safer with safety standards.
Social psychologist Jonathan Haidt says the rise of social media coincided with an epidemic of mental illness.
Children today are getting less of everything else that matters. Less sleep, less time with friends, less time outside, less time moving. They're losing childhood, and that's got to impede childhood development.
Dodeja Smith says she welcomes warning labels, but
I feel like it's a really good move in the right direction, but as for what it's going to do, I don't have a whole lot of hope, to be honest.
We reached out to several social media companies. Meta did not comment, but company officials pointed to its proposed legislation to require app stores to get a parent's approval before a child under 16 downloads an app. The company also said that there's other research that points to some positive benefits from social media for teens. Nora?
President Trump has vowed to remove barriers stopping America from being the leader in artificial intelligence development. In one of the president's first executive orders, he called for a review of policies and regulations, which he says could slow innovation. But AI with no guardrails is alarming to Christopher DiCarlo, author of the book Building a God, and he joins me for tonight's interview. So, Chris, we talked about this a couple of months ago, but remind me or give us a sense of what you think unbridled, unregulated artificial intelligence would look like.
Yeah, it would. The metaphor is it'd be like you're driving in a really nice fast car towards the edge of a canyon, and the view just keeps getting better as you go. So it's going to be very alluring because AI is going to develop a lot of really novel things that will help us make our lives better. But on that way, on that journey, on that path, we're going to be developing really, really powerful systems, so powerful that we're not exactly sure what's going to happen when they come into being. And that's what worries us.
Right. So it coaxes us into the canyon. Why do you think that AI tech leaders who had gone to Washington and said, please help us control this thing, essentially paraphrasing there, why do you think they've changed their mind on regulations?
There's a number of reasons. The most obvious is the bottom line, right? Money is usually the central motivating factor. There's a lot of investors, right? There's a lot of money involved in having one of these organizations, OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, Meta, maybe even XAI, get to the holy grail of AI, which is artificial general intelligence, or AGI. And they're all racing to get a hold, to be the first to get there, because there's a bit of that kind of, entrepreneurial spirit, frontier kind of, I was the first to get there. And also it's very much driven by the bottom line.
What do you make of the vice president's comment that, quote, we have to be leaning into the AI future with optimism and hope?
I mean, that's good intentions, right? Those are great intentions. It's who's kidding who? I mean, J.D. Vance was one of, Peter Thiel's boys with the PayPal mafia. So, of course he sides with wanting to drill, baby, drill. And I get that, but you can't do that just because you want to make America first, or you want to beat China, or it's good for the economy, or whatever else you want to do to, fill in the blanks there. You have to do it with the consideration of what this could potentially lead to in terms of dangers if we go outside the guardrails too fast, too soon, and too much.
We have a little less than a minute here. Remind us here at the end what that means, because your book argues essentially once you go outside the guardrails, you can't go back, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the genie will be out of the bottle. Just imagine something incredibly powerful that we've never built before, that this system, this machine, is godlike in its ability to understand how the world functions. And it's going to have enormous power and capabilities. We've never been at this point in our lives, in our history, ever. And now all of a sudden we're going to create this enormously powerful machine, turn it on, and hope that we're going to be able to control it or contain it.
The FBI today put out its annual warning that cyber criminals are targeting us, especially older people. Victims last year reported losses of $16 billion. That's up 33% from the year before. The largest group of victims were 60 and older. And Scott McFarland tells us that more and more often the weapon of choice in cybercrime is artificial intelligence.
How did they get $1.7 million out of you in 3 months?
They were good.
Rich Brune never saw the faces of the criminals who ripped him off of nearly $2 million. Instead, one day, working on his computer, a message popped up. His information had been compromised, and that he was under investigation for unlawful computer uploads.
Contact this number, lock up your computer. Don't shut your computer off.
The criminals convinced this Vietnam veteran to wire money and open up access to his bank account to clear things up. Today's report from the FBI shows new technology has triggered a surge in identity theft, data breaches, and swindles. More than $16 billion in computer crime losses last year, an amount the FBI calls staggering, and a $4 billion jump from just a year earlier. And more than a quarter of it from victims over the age of 60.
It's text messages, it's phone calls, it's emails.
Ben Winters of the Consumer Federation of America says artificial intelligence has supercharged how fraudsters do business.
Are they allowing people to execute more schemes or better schemes?
Both. So you're able to do more at scale, but also less likely for a clear mistake that would set someone off and not fall for that.
The FBI's new report says it's now getting 2,000 complaints a day. Brune never recovered a penny.
I think a lot of people would watch that and go, I would be irate.
It's not worth the effort. Who are you going to get angry at?
They never caught the people responsible.
No, that's what I'm saying. You don't know who to get angry at.
So, Scott, why is it so tough for the FBI to get its arms around this?
And Maurice, more people are carrying more devices now, but some of us have gotten pretty good at spotting the telltale signs of a scheme, email, or text, those imperfections. Maurice, the AI is making those harder to detect, easier to fall for.
So they're everywhere now. So what are the experts saying about protecting yourself?
One universal thing to keep in mind, if you see an urgency to a message asking you to send money, that you have to do it right now, the best available red flag, something's wrong.
What if college students went through orientation twice, not just at the start, but after graduation? That thought came to me while talking to Alan Powell, director of the Career Center at the University of Maryland. I checked in to ask her what she was hearing from the class of 2025 as it prepared to launch. She said many wise things, but her point about community stuck. Don't do this in isolation, she tells students. It's easy to get in your head and you think you're the only one. You're not alone. It may take you more time than you thought, but you will get there. That idea, that community isn't just comforting, it's a survival skill, echoed a New York Times Magazine story from today about happiness. The clearest predictor of long-term health and happiness, based on a century of research, is the quality of a person's relationships. Community of the kind Alan Powell was talking about when she counseled community building as a life skill. This generation needs that, 18 to 29-year-olds in the United States report the lowest levels of happiness, purpose, relationships, and health compared to older generations. That's according to the new Global Flourishing Study, which looked at 200,000 people across 20-plus countries. Why? Experts say loneliness, screen time, perfectionism, and the collapse of gathering spaces, churches, clubs, civic groups. We've outsourced our identities to apps, replaced participation with performance. But human connection isn't a luxury, it's infrastructure. Community is the most predictive, protective, and teachable life skill that we're ignoring. If we ever designed that exit orientation after graduation, its first message would be, you're not alone. The final exercise, who shows up for you and who do you show up for? That would determine the final grade for everyone.
New York Governor Kathy Hochul is calling for restrictions on cell phone use in schools across the state. At least 8 states have enacted statewide bans or restrictions on phones in schools. Anyone with a child knows how challenging it is to separate a kid from their phone. But in tonight's Eye on America, CBS's Meg Oliver found out kids will survive.
Like most 8th graders, 14-year-old Ben Cohen-Victor has a cell phone. Unlike most, his is a flip phone.
Why did you want to try a flip phone?
I knew that something had to change because I was not getting my work done. I was very anxious. I was biting my nails a lot.
It all started last February when Ben lost his cell phone on the school bus.
I was without a phone for sort of 2 days, and I realized how my days were just so much longer and more full.
So much better, the lacrosse goalie made the radical choice to buy a flip phone.
I feel very proud of myself.
He used to average up to 5 hours of screen time a day. Now it's about 30 minutes. A CDC report says half of American teenagers spend 4 or more hours on screens. Teenagers with higher daily screen time are more likely to experience anxiety and depression.
It can be distracting.
So we asked 4 of Ben's friends, Carson, Renita, Jameson, and Maya, all 8th graders in New Jersey, to try flip phones for a week.
What is your average daily screen time on your phone?
10.5 hours.
10.5 hours? What are you doing on your phone for 10 hours a day?
Watching Gossip Girl and TikTok.
They were curious but skeptical about the experiment. Jameson says he isn't doing as well as he wants to in school.
I think my phone's a big factor in that.
Although Renita plays 3 sports, she admits wasting time on her phone.
Then I'll realize 30 minutes or an hour has gone by.
Carson agreed to participate, but the avid basketball player was nervous.
As I got closer, I started having bad thoughts about it.
But Maya, who loves studying English and just started rowing, is hoping this trial helps her at night.
Hand over the phones. Let's see. It's going to be okay. Thanks, Jameson. Are you ready? Here's your new flip phone. Do you know how to text on there?
No.
No.
It's day 2. It was hard because I didn't have my phone.
Carson didn't make it. He asked for his phone back within 24 hours.
What have you been doing without your smartphone?
I just sat there and stared at my wall until I'd practice.
How do I add a new contact?
The others stuck it out, sending in mostly positive reviews.
I have been sleeping a lot better. I'm a lot less tired during the day. I don't have my Apple Pay, which really doesn't help.
I finish homework so easily and faster.
Hi.
Hello there.
How are you?
7 days later, we reconvened.
It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be.
And Jameson, what was the positive for you?
Well, I talked to my parents a lot more and I went out a lot more with my friends.
What did you learn from this?
I think that not your whole life should be on your screen. There should be things just off of that.
I think it helped them even in ways they don't realize.
In February, it will be a full year for Ben and his flip phone. His friends may not want to join him full time, but he believes it's never too late to make a change.
It doesn't have to be something as drastic as completely getting rid of all your social media. I still have an Instagram account that I will use on my computer, but it's more about doing small things that you can bring together to just fix that constant need.
A smart lesson learned without a smartphone. For Eye on America, Meg Oliver, Montclair, New Jersey.